Combination cooking uses both dry and moist heat cooking methods. The ingredients are first browned and then slowly simmered in a liquid. Braising, stewing, and pot roasting are the most familiar combination cooking techniques. These techniques allow you to turn tough cuts of meat into tender and succulent dishes. In this lesson, you will learn how to choose the right cut of meat and why certain cuts are better than others. You will then learn how to start building flavor through browning and caramelization. Lastly, you will learn about the importance of the correct liquid-to-meat ratio and why low and slow cooking is vital in creating fork-tender results. By learning just a few key steps, you will be on your way to creating your own flavorful and tender braises, stews, or pot roasts, without the need for a recipe. To choose the right cut of meat for combination cooking, it is important to understand where tougher cuts of meat come from. In general, muscles that do a lot of heavy work, such as the shoulders, neck, and legs, are tougher because they move and carry the animal's weight. Even the tail is tougher as it is constantly moving. These tougher cuts are better for combination cooking as they are intertwined with connective tissue, bones, and fat, which all add flavor and moisture to the meat during the slow cooking process. No matter which animal these tougher cuts come from, there are visual cues that will help you identify them. Take this chicken leg, for example. You can clearly see there's a good amount of fat and connective tissue. This breast, in comparison, has little to no fat or connective tissue. Now let's compare this stewing meat, which comes from the shoulder. It also has plenty of connective tissue in comparison to this lean, tenderloin steak. Same thing with this pork shoulder compared to a lean pork tenderloin. Even this lamb shank has much more connective tissue than this tender rack of lamb. In all of these examples, the tougher cuts have plenty of fat and connective tissue, which are best when cooking meats for longer periods of time. To help you understand why connective tissue is important, let's take a look at this short rib, which has plenty of connective tissue and a good amount of fat. Collagen is a shiny, web-like protein, which you can clearly see when the meat is pulled apart. You can even see it here between the fibers of the meat. Collagen plays a vital role in combination cooking because during the slow cooking process, it dissolves as gelatin. Gelatin is important because as it melts, it sticks to the molecules and particles of flavor within the liquid, essentially trapping the flavors and bringing everything together. To help you better understand why gelatin is so vital, we'll cook two different, tougher cuts of meat. This beef shank contains plenty of connective tissue and a good amount of fat, whereas this lean eye of round has very little. Each will be slowly cooked in equal amounts of water until fork tender. During the long, slow cooking process, the connective tissue melts into gelatin. This gelatin is much easier to see when the liquid has completely chilled. You can clearly see how much gelatin the liquid from the beef shank contains, in comparison to the liquid from the eye of round. This is due to the amount of connective tissue present in the beef shank. This is essentially the same thing you learned with stocks. The more collagen and connective tissue the bones contain, the more viscosity or body the stock will have. One final note, some connective tissue, in the form of silver skin, is very thick and does not dissolve during the cooking process. This tough silver skin should be removed and discarded before cooking. However, make sure to not trim off too much fat, as the fat contributes both flavor and moisture to the dish. The ideal pot for combination cooking is one that is oven-proof. It should also be heavy-bottomed to insulate the food and have a tight-fitting lid to prevent evaporation. Whether or not you are braising, stewing, or pot roasting, it is important to make sure that the ingredients fit nice and snug in the pot. This ensures not having to use more liquid than necessary to cook the ingredients. Using more liquid than is required would only dilute the flavor of the meat and the final sauce. The first key step to combination cooking is to brown the main ingredient. The golden crust helps to create both flavor and color, particularly for the sauce. It is important to take the time to evenly brown or sear the entire surface without burning. Also, do not flip the meat too soon. Just let it cook and develop nice color and a good crust before turning. Depending on how much you are cooking, browning may have to be done in batches. This browning is important, as the liquid which is added later will deglaze the soups that have developed in the pot. You can see here the nice crust on the meat's surface. This flavorful crust actually dissolves during the cooking process. This is why browning the meat is so important, as this contributes enormous flavor and rich color to the dish. The second key step to combination cooking is to add a liquid. The liquid does two main things. The gentle heat of the liquid dissolves the collagen in the meat, which helps to tenderize it. It also helps to create a flavorful sauce in the end. Water can be used with good results. However, for added flavor, any combination of wine, stock, beer, or cream can be used. The liquid will flavor the meat, and in exchange, the meat will lend flavor to the liquid. How much liquid to add will depend on whether you are braising, stewing, or pot roasting, each of which will be covered in its own lesson. Generally, you want just enough liquid to cook the meat and still have an appropriate amount of flavorful sauce in the end. In this example, there is an appropriate ratio of meat to liquid. There is enough meat to flavor the surrounding liquid and just enough liquid to cook the meat. In this exaggerated example, a single piece of meat is being cooked in much more liquid than required. In this case, there is definitely not enough meat to flavor the amount of liquid. Both the flavor and color of the sauce will be diluted. Slow and low cooking is one of the most important steps in combination cooking. In the submersion cooking method lesson, you learned that proteins which are boiled or cooked at higher temperatures will tighten quickly and squeeze out moisture. These tightened fibers are less sponge-like and will therefore hold less of the flavorful juices. In contrast, proteins which are poached or simmered will tighten and contract at a much slower rate. They will also not tighten as much and will therefore hold much more of the flavorful juices. Basically, once the juices from the meat are squeezed out, they are then able to mix with the aromatics and flavorful liquids in the dish. Once the meat fibers relax and loosen, the flavorful liquid can then be reabsorbed. The longer the cooking time, the more intense the infusion between the meat and the liquid will be. Though combination cooking usually starts on the stove top, slow and low cooking is best done in the oven for even and gentle surround heat. The ideal temperature will be around 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 95 degrees Celsius, which is essentially a slow, gentle simmer. Depending on the size of the meat, it will take at least 1.5 hours to begin to break down the meat. However, in combination cooking, you shouldn't depend on times. Cooking times will vary, depending on the size of what you are cooking. Check the dish regularly and cook until fork tender. Once the dish is ready, it should ideally be left to rest for about half an hour before serving. This is for 3 reasons. 1. The resting period will help the meat to relax and reabsorb more of the delicious sauce. 2. Our taste sensations cannot appreciate the full flavor of foods when they are piping hot. And 3. The gelatin in the dish is also affected by temperature. If the dish is too hot, the sauce will have less viscosity, meaning that it will simply slide over the tongue and taste buds. whereas foods that have had time to cool slightly will have more viscosity, meaning the texture and flavor will linger longer in the mouth. In summary, when combination cooking, remember that the meat you choose will make all the difference. Brown the meat in an appropriate size pot and fill with just enough liquid to create a rich and flavorful sauce. And most importantly, remember that low and slow cooking is essential to produce those fork-tender and succulent dishes. In this lesson, you will learn about submersion moist heat cooking, which includes poaching, simmering, and boiling. In these cases, ingredients are fully cooked by being submerged in hot liquids. While these methods may come across as somewhat simple, understanding the key differences between them and knowing when and how to use them is vital to success in the kitchen. The main difference between each of these methods is temperature, which varies only by about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. However, within this temperature range, food is impacted in very different ways.